Yes, it's about that time. I'm actually shocked that I haven't talked about Attack on Titan, Shingeki no Kyojin at all on this channel yet. Because I've talked about Dragon Ball. I'm pretty sure I've talked about most of the big three so far. I've talked about Bleach, I've talked about Naruto, I've talked about Dragon Ball on this channel, but I haven't talked about Attack on Titan, and I need to because I'm actually a huge Shingeki no Kyojin fan. Now, as far as this episode goes, I do read the manga. I am up to date completely with that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to reserve the last third or so, or fourth of this video for the manga readers. So you don't have to worry about spoilers until, like, I'm going to give you a pretty clear announcement, and if you ignore past that point, that is your fault. And please, don't be that guy. Don't spoil in the comments. I will ban you, like, immediately. I do read my comments. And I'm not a big YouTuber, I don't get a lot of them, so if you do spoil, I'm going to notice you. So without further ado, let's talk about things that were improved upon from the manga. The reveal. Let's just get right to the chase. The reveal that Reiner and Bertolt are the Armored and Colossal Titan, respectively. Now, I will say, when I read this in the manga, I kind of had already an idea that Reiner was the Armored Titan based on I did think, like, his performance against the female Titan was very suspicious, and he just looked like the Armored Titan. Like, it was just very clear. The Armored Titan is already based off of Brock Lesnar, and I mean, look at Reiner. Just look at him. But Bertolt, I had no idea. Like, it's just, that came as a surprise to me. But they really did the scene justice in terms of how casual it was, because even in the manga, they purposefully set aside the reveal, like the speech bubble, into a corner. Like, it didn't even get its own page or anything, or even like a half a page. It was just like a small little panel in the corner while all the other conversations are taking place. And I may not be remembering the manga as well as I should, but one thing that really stuck out to me is that in the manga, let's just be frank about this, Isayama is a story writer before he is an artist, so he doesn't always do the best job of conveying to us through his illustrations how characters are positioned relative to each other, especially in conversation. So, and like, the backgrounds are not always the most detailed. I mean, I feel like he already has a lot of trouble making the characters look up to par compared to other manga artists like Oda or Kishimoto or fuck, who's the guy who wrote Death Note? I forget his name, like, it's not off the top of my head, but they're clearly artists before they are story writers, and for Isayama, it's the other way around. Plus the fact that it's a monthly, so he's had a lot of stuff to write within that time period and draw. So in the manga, I just kind of assumed that Reiner, I just gave him the benefit of the doubt that he and Bertolt had set aside Eren to talk in private, to where they wouldn't think that anybody would hear. But in the anime, now that you have a better sense of where exactly they are, it was really a shock, because Mikasa and Armin are not even like 10 meters away from where they set aside Eren to talk in private. And it's like, did you think they weren't gonna hear him? But it does kind of add to Reiner's character, and it convinces us that he's slowly becoming more and more unhinged as he's being placed in danger. And it's not just that he's being placed in danger, it's that he's being placed in danger and he can't use his powers to defend himself, for fear that, well, I mean, obviously he would blow his cover by then. And in this episode, he just finally decides that he's had it, and that he's just gonna blow his cover. He's not taking any of this bullshit any longer after he almost got eaten by a normal mindless Titan. Another thing that you have to give this adaptation credit for is the voice acting. I mean, you really get the sense that, like, Reiner's voice acting especially, like, when he just starts going off nonchalant as fuck, announcing that they were tasked to wipe out humanity, and that's just how it is. That's just like, it's like they're talking about going to grab a drink or something. That's how casual it was, and that's not something that is really conveyed very well in the manga, like the intonation of the voices and all of that. Because upon hearing something like that, even within the context of the manga, you kind of assume that he is whispering, and 2 is taking it seriously, but he's really not. He's just kind of saying it like it's everyday knowledge. And that's great, because that really helps out the characterization of Reiner when it comes to when he gets to the part about them being kids. That's a line you really have to take out from Reiner's little monologue before him and Bertolt are going to transform. I remember when I was reading the manga as it was coming out, this was before the reveal, there were already theories out there about Bertolt and Reiner being the Colossal and Armor Titan respectively, but the main issue I had with this in the beginning was that, I mean, Reiner and Bertolt they're 17 around this point in time when they transform in front of Eren. So that would make them like 11 or 12 when they broke down the walls, and I'm like, no, it can't be true. They can't just be like little kids breaking down the walls and wiping out like a third of humanity. And the reason I was alright with, Annie being so young is because, from my point of view, Annie wasn't there when they broke down the walls. At this point, you could infer, I mean, it was kind of stated to you that these 3 Titans were in cahoots, but again, Annie the female Titan was not there when the wall first broke down, or so we thought. That was our inference. But the Armored and Colossal Titan were, so I'm like, no, they have to be like higher ranking Titans that are older. So I like how, in this point in the story, they sort of acknowledge that they're sort of almost like child soldiers that are being used for some other party's agenda, so to speak, and that they didn't really know what they were doing. They were just doing what they were told. So it adds another layer to these characters that were already with us from the start. Well, more or less from the start, now we've been learning about. So it really goes against what a lot of stories do. A lot of stories write their betrayals very lazily by having the excuse of, oh, well, it was all just an act, and now we're going to have this character completely shift in personality. But no, that's not the case. Especially with Reiner, it hits you that, from his monologue, that him and his interactions with all of his friends in the 104th, that wasn't an act. Really, it wasn't. He was just keeping that separate from his so-called warrior side, as the Armored Titan, as him going about his duty. And now he's starting to feel conflicted about it, and he's met with a choice. Do I try and keep up this cover and risk death, or do I just disregard my feelings for my friends and just commit? So he had the choice there, and he was making a choice for a very long time there. I mean, he could have easily just decided when he got bit by that titan, fuck this, I'm out of here. Bertolt, let's transform and get the fuck out of here. But he didn't do that. And he waited until now to, as he was slowly, I mean, who wouldn't go crazy in that kind of situation, especially knowing that you have the power to survive, but not being able to use it. So it's not like suddenly they become different characters just because they've turncoated, you know what I'm saying? And so that makes it feel all the more real. So in terms of the technical things, the animation and pacing, the pacing is not really... I do have some problem with how the episodes are being paced, but it's a consistency with the entire season so far that I've found. And it's not just with this episode. It's that I found that they have a tendency to only adapt, like they stick almost panel to panel, one chapter. In this episode, for example, they only adapted chapter 42. Granted, the series is monthly, so the chapters are longer than weekly series. But still, I mean, you should be able to adapt a little bit more than one chapter per episode. And I feel like this season so far, the direction it's taking, keep in mind, it's not the same director as season 1, who was Tetsuo Araki, I believe his name was. I don't know if I... forgive me if that's wrong, but he's the guy who did the Death Note anime. But the direction here, like, they're almost putting themselves in a box where, like, no, we only animate one chapter and that's it. Even if we have to draw out sequences. Like, the sequence after the flashback, for example, I felt like that dragged on for 2 minutes too long. Like with the still shots. Granted, they were directed well, but it didn't contribute anything to the pacing of the episode. And I felt like that was purposely done to leave us with the cliffhanger that chapter 42 had. So it almost comes off as lazy, because then you don't have to adapt multiple chapters into an episode. You can just go scene by scene. It's almost like they're using the manga chapter directly as a storyboard. And I don't know. It's not like it's done badly, but it just comes off as lazy. Just a little bit. And then we gotta talk about the elephant in the room, the CGI Colossal Titan. Now, I don't think it's as bad as everybody has been making out to be. Like, I was just kind of indifferent to it. Like, yes, it looked different, but I think most people are caught up by the fact that it looks jarring next to all of the 2D characters. It's something that really stands out because it's the focus of the scene. Unlike, for example, the CGI horses that were in episode 1, I believe. Like, that worked because the horses weren't they weren't the center of that scene. They weren't the focus. It was the characters conversing about their strategy. And the CGI was used to convey the feeling of more realistic motion. But with something as big and hulking as and attention-grabbing as the Colossal Titan, I don't know how they expected that to blend in well, because it really does kind of look like a PS4 model. Granted, the the PS4 game, I wouldn't be surprised if it came out that they were using the same engine for that model as the latest Attack on Titan game that came out for PS4 and I think PC as well, which I haven't played, but I heard it's decent. And it especially is going to be bothersome in the next chapter, depending on how much they decide to utilize the Colossal Titan in the next episode. Because it's one thing if you have the Colossal Titan, but you only see it for a couple of scenes or frames. And that way it's not like, the less you have to look at it, the less jarring it's going to seem. So that's why I'm a little bit worried about next episode, because they probably realize this. So I'm worried that they're purposely going to try to cut down on the scenes with the Survey Corps versus the Colossal Titan for the sake of us not having to look at the CGI as much and realize how jarring it is. And it feels like at this point I'm beating up on the episode, which I'm really not. It's one of the best episodes in the entire series so far. And one of the things that really contributed to that is the soundtrack. Oh my goodness, the soundtrack. I heard it's going to be released sometime in June, but at this point I cannot wait for it. One of the best things about the soundtrack is that I never thought I'd be saying this about a soundtrack, but like, it brings back tracks from season 1. And because the way like that it's being directed, well, not directed, but because they're trying to make it seem like it's all just one progressive flow instead of 2 separate seasons. Like, this episode was not called Season 2 Episode 6, it's called Episode 31. So that's why they're bringing back the old soundtrack, but they make tweaks to some tracks. And it's not big sweeping differences at times, like with this rendition of Vogel im Kaffee. But the little differences just makes it sound fresh to our ears, and it's so good. And it doesn't take away, like, it doesn't make the track worse. They're not additions that are over the top or like they don't try too hard to make the track sound different. But they only change things that will add to the track and make it sound more appealing and fit the scenes better. So definitely an excellent direction for the soundtrack, as well as new tracks that weren't in the Season 1 OST. So I cannot wait for that OST to drop in June. And it's one of the strongest points about both this episode and the season as a whole. Alright, so now it's time for me to talk about what's coming ahead, specifically like manga spoilers and all of that, so...
Get out! Out! No! Get out! Out! Get out!
Alright, I think I've given you guys a fair warning. If you don't want manga spoilers, this is where the video for you ends. So, manga readers, let's talk about what's going to come next episode. So let's go back to the thing about the CGI Colossus Titan, because this worried me, because this was something that I was hoping the adaptation of the anime was going to expand on, is the fight between the Scouts and the Colossal Titan. Because really, as far as I remember, in the following chapters, you see a lot of Armored Titan versus Eren, you see a lot of that shit, but you really don't get to see as much of Colossal Titan versus the Scouts before the Colossal Titan, like, You know where he does a thing where he drops down on top of Eren and Reiner, and that allows them all to escape. So that was one thing I was really hoping that would be expanded on in the anime. Like, let's get some more action between. Now that you have all this time to animate and expand upon that scene, like if you're really only gonna go for like one chapter per episode, this is your opportunity to make the most out of that and not just use it for padding, is having an expanded fight scene between the Colossal Titan and all the scouts. But now I feel like they're not going to do that because of the CGI. Because the CG kind of works in their favor for the following fight in a way, because the Colossal Titan doesn't actually have a lot of screen time. Not as much as you would think anyway. And I wanted more. And now we're probably not going to get more. It's probably going to be like panel for panel, because they know that the CGI model, it's not necessarily bad, it's just jarring to look at compared to, like, next to all of the 2D characters, when the CG model is the focus of the scene. Like, it dominates attention in every scene that it's in, because it's the fucking Colossal Titan, it's the icon of the series. So that immediately makes me think that they're just gonna go with what's in the source material, in which the Colossal Titan is not really... there's not a whole lot of Colossal Titan on-screen action, which I guess that's what allowed them to take the CGI shortcut in the end. So now let's talk about another thing that I wanted to talk about that related to a lot of manga spoilers. Reiner's character. Man, this has been a great month for Reiner, just in both in terms of the manga and the anime. Let's talk about the latest manga chapter first of all, and the wonders that does for Reiner's character. And how that, I mean, the root of that is this chapter, this scene, this episode, where he first reveals himself, and right off the bat, he's like, shit, I'm conflicted, but I have to make a choice. And now, I think in the latest manga chapters, as you can see with his conversation with Falco, he's starting to regret the choices he's made. He's like, become the Armored Titan so that you can save Gabby from our fate. Our fate as basically child soldiers. Like, let's just call it what it is. That's what Reiner and Bertolt were when they were sent to retrieve the coordinate by knocking down the walls. Now that's one thing. Another thing that kind of confused me in this episode, because I wasn't really recalling the manga properly. When Reiner says that we're not going to have to knock down the walls because we found you, Eren, he's bullshitting. He doesn't know that Eren's the coordinate yet. He doesn't find that out until the events of the end of this season, what I'm predicting. I think at this point, with how the pacing is going, it's no secret that this season of the anime is going to end with Eren using the coordinate powers, that whole fight with, you know, the Scouting Legion trying to get Eren back. So, and all of that, you know, the Smiling Titan, and rest in peace Hans. I think that's going to be like the last episode. And that's when Reiner finds out about the coordinate, that Eren has his objective. So then when he's talking about how, like, we're not going to take down any more of the walls because we have Eren, he's talking out of his ass, because he doesn't know that Eren's the coordinate, therefore he has to keep looking for it within the walls. Now, the initial strategy that Marley used, or that they employed for this, is actually it's ruthless, and it's kind of sadistic, but it works. The plan is knock down all of the walls, have the Titans invade the normal mindless Titans, and at that point, whoever has the coordinates within the walls either has to transform and reveal themselves to protect themselves, or they just get eaten, and whoever eats them gets the coordinate. It's going to be obvious because they'll turn back into humans, and at that point, Reiner, Annie, and Bertolt swoop in, kick his ass, and take him back to Marley. Now, the factor of this that I'm kind of unclear on is that, did they just assume that Eren had the coordinate because they didn't know that Grisha stole the attack? No, they had to have known, because the attack Titan was under Marley's control until Eren Kruger stole it. So, and it's confusing, because on one hand you could say, well, they probably assumed that Eren had something to do with the coordinate because he's the only Titan shifter that they couldn't account for within the walls. They could account for Ymir because they know that she's the Jaw Titan that Marcel possessed. But Eren was just kind of an enigma to them. They were like, what the fuck? Who is this guy that can just transform into a Titan? But then he's also not a Fritz. I mean, you would think that Bertolt and Reiner and Annie would be briefed on who could have the coordinate. It's the royal families, the nobles within Walshina. So it's just a clusterfuck because I don't know if it's exactly within Reiner's character to lie about that. I mean, I guess it could be for the sake of getting Eren to join them. Because at first, yeah, I guess the way it was coming off, like, the conflict I'm having is I'm having trouble deciding whether, in the beginning, when they first found out that Eren was a Titan Shifter, were Annie, Bertolt, and Reiner trying to recruit him just to have another one of the Titan Shifters on their side? Like, to have the Attack Titan back? Or from the bat did they assume that he had something to do with the coordinates? If that's the case, then why did Reiner look so confused and surprised when he saw the coordinate being used, you know, during that scene? He's like, holy shit, it fell into the worst hands possible. It fell into Eren's hands, and he's fucking unstable and a psychopath. So, yeah, so that's one thing where I'm still kind of... I need clarifications. Maybe I haven't remembered things from the manga. Maybe I missed something or forgot something from the manga that cleared this up as to what Reiner's and Annie's initial intent was with Eren before they knew 100% that he had the coordinates. And I mean, if it's like I assumed and that they just wanted to recruit him, then yes, Reiner was 100% bullshitting him when he said that we're not going to have to knock down more of the walls in order to... because they still have to find the coordinate, even if they recruit Eren. Because at this point, they don't know... Fuck, I'm repeating myself. And now that I bring this up, it just occurred to me that it makes a ton of sense now why Annie joined the military police, obviously. And it honestly puzzles me why Reiner and Bertolt didn't just follow her, because that's the perfect place where you would find the coordinate. But again, that's the thing. It kind of proves that Reiner and Bertolt's loyalty to the 104th and their friends isn't fake. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to join the Scouts. They could have just joined the military police and continued the search for the coordinate. So that's all I have to say about this episode. Shit, that probably ended up being like half the video. So half the video is like manga spoilers, fuck. If you want to see me talk more Attack on Titan, go ahead and leave this a like, and I will see you guys next time.